How's everybody doing? Good? We got some strategic sitters back here so they can slide out if they have to. I like it. My name's Marascio, Senior Product Architect from Beyond Identity. And we're going to talk today about the Snowflake breach, even though Snowflake didn't actually get breached, and the response, and what the best practices were, what we learned, what we didn't, and so on, right? There we go. So, this is probably not news to folks. I find it rather shocking still. And I find it shocking because we know what the answers are, right? Everybody probably here knows what the answers are. We think that, the answers are well known, the technology is there, it should be easy to deploy, but it still happens, right? Phish credentials are still the #1 vector to get in, and in a surprisingly large number of companies every year are exposed to access breaches. And the question is why does it still happen? Why does it continue to happen, right? You don't have to believe the statistics. It's in the news all the time, right? It's in the news all the time. We just heard about Authy from Twilio and all this stuff. Like, it continues to happen over and over and over and over again. Why? Right? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we know the answer is MFA, quote unquote, right? And people deploy MFA all the time, right? MFA's been around forever, right? Back in the day with Duo and SMS and all this great stuff, it's going to save the day. So folks say, hey, let's deploy some MFA, right? It's simple. They jump on whatever, pick your favorite. You've got Entra, you're an E5 customer, you click the button, it doesn't matter. You roll it out without really thinking twice because it's MFA, it's going to solve the problem, right? And you kind of sit there and you're feeling good, right? I'm done. Sysadmin's done. MFA's deployed. Kick back, have a beer, right? And then this happens, right? You're an admin, you've deployed this crap, it's out there. And then you go on Reddit and you're like, why do my users keep getting hacked? What the heck is going on? And this is literally, I did the guy a favor and blurred out his username, but you can go Google it, you'll land on the thing, right? It's there, right? This is the third time in the last 2 months. How are they bypassing my two-factor auth, right? And this is the systems administrator of this particular random company on the internet complaining about this problem. Again, we know the answers. We think we know the answers, and we think we're doing the right thing. But the reality is, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, right? Technology moves fast. The attackers move fast. Back in the day with SMS, we thought that was going to solve the problem 10 or 15 years ago whenever that happened. Then we realized that, the telephony network's not secure at all, right? I used to do telephony, right? Like, there's no security at all there, right? Spoofing, caller ID with my PRI line from my IP telephony service provider back, it doesn't matter, right? So the technology has evolved to solve these problems. We just need to open our eyes and use it. So I put the brisket up here because I'm from Texas. Like, I apologize. I'm a simple-minded person, and brisket is, kind of my love language, if you will. This is an absolutely beautiful-looking piece of brisket. And the reason why I put it up there is because if you've ever tried to smoke a brisket at home, and you've gone online, you got your smoker, you got the rubs, you got online, you read all the stuff, right? And you come away thinking it's like, really complicated. And then you go and run across a guy named Aaron Franklin or whatever. And he's like, you just use salt and pepper and throw it on and, light the fire and keep the fire clean. You kick back, no big deal, have a beer. He makes it sound very easy. It's subtly very complicated. That's why Aaron Franklin's a millionaire now, right? Because he mastered brisket, literally mastered brisket, right? There's people who go to Aaron Franklin's house, restaurant in Austin. They set up at 6 a.m. in the morning. They wait all day to get brisket. They have a religious experience, and they go home, right? It's just a piece of meat that's smoked with salt and pepper, but he does it very well. The details matter, right? The details matter a lot. And MFA, like, it's not a brisket. Like, don't get me wrong. It doesn't get me going like a brisket does. But MFA, the details matter too. A lot, right? And that's why when you just deploy MFA and throw it out there and turn your users on, you go through the trouble and they say, they gripe about having to deal with MFA, and you finally get them to use it, and then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, they get breached because they click on the stupid link in the email, right? Because it's phishable. And then they come back to you and say, I thought this was going to solve all my problems. Well, it doesn't. So it's important to understand that the details matter with MFA, and it's important to understand that when we look at the problem of MFA breaches and why they are endemic, that we realize that they're endemic because we're deploying crap MFA, among other things. But there are shining lights and examples of how to do it properly. Now, I want to talk about Snowflake real quick, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend here, Jonathan, to do that. And Snowflake is an example of how to do it right. Okay, Jonathan?
Sure, yeah, so there we go, okay. Hit one of these buttons, right?
Bottom button goes forward.
Bottom button goes forward. That's very intuitive. Okay, there we go. Would you click on the link in the email if it was about brisket?
I might click on the link if
I
was hungry.
If I was going to fish you, that's what I would do. So first of all, why on earth should you listen to me? I don't work for Beyond Identity, and why do I have anything to say about this at all? I'm here because I used to work at Snowflake. I've also been in security since 1999, but I'm judging by the way I'm looking around the room, no insult to a lot of you. So that's probably not a bona fide that's going to get me very far. But at Snowflake, I was part of what's called the security field CTO team. First of all, hands up if you're a Snowflake customer. Okay, a couple, all right, a few, many, what's the right, several, right? I was gonna say, no specific number here. But if you don't know what Snowflake is, data platform in the cloud, software as a service, and essentially, we had a whole team called the Security Field CTO team. I shouldn't say past. It's past for me. It's not past for Snowflake. Snowflake still has this team. And first of all, I'm going to say that this was not my idea. I didn't have the idea to have this team, right? The person who did is this guy, Matt Glickman, and he had 18 years at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, you might imagine, has a few security rules for their vendors, just a few. And he realized that if he was ever going to get a SaaS platform that holds their data into that bank, he needed people who could have a conversation about security, have that conversation honestly, and have that conversation directly with the security staff of those companies, right? And so they built this team. And I'll just say, I was kind of privileged to be a part of it because I got hired, and I was the first one they hired, but we built a team very quickly because I was working 180-hour weeks my first couple of months there, which was not sustainable. I think every SaaS vendor should have a team like this. That's just me on my soapbox, right? But that's why I'm sort of qualified to talk to you all about what happened at Snowflake, right? Now, in case none of that made sense as to what my job was, this was the slide that we would use to begin the conversation about security with Snowflake. And I literally, now obviously this didn't happen with firms like the one I mentioned, but I had conversations that would end in 10 minutes. Because I would get on the line with some of these smaller organizations, I would show them this slide, I would tell them that there were 85 slides to support that, all those hyperlinks are to other sections of the deck, and they would go, I'm done, that's what I wanted. If every vendor gave me this, I wouldn't have to like go through this rigmarole all the time, right? So that was our job, right? Was to communicate to the customer efficiently, what are the security protocols in Snowflake, right? So far, it sounds like we shouldn't be talking about Snowflake having a security incident, doesn't it? We're going to get there. So I was just telling the folks in the front row that I come to Las Vegas a lot more than I want to. And mostly it's to do this type of thing that I'm doing right now, is to communicate to people and have meetings and yada, yada, yada. The last time I came here, though, it was kind of cool. My wife came out with me, all right? And here's the thing. My wife made me go to Prada. Now, here's where a lot of you rush ahead to, oh, he's going to tell a story about how he didn't want to go. But no, not at all. I was thrilled because my wife never spends money on herself. Like, she just never does it. And I was really happy that she was like, you know what, I want to get a nice purse, and they have all these stores in one place, and we could. I was like, yes, let's totally do that. And I spent the entire time on the phone. Like, literally the entire time on the phone. Now, by the way, the bag that I picked out at Prada was the bag she ended up buying. So I still got full credit for the day, even though I was on the freaking phone the whole time. And why was I on the phone the whole time when I was so thrilled to be purse shopping with my wife? These guys. Anyone ever heard of Hudson Rock? Anyone know what this is? Oh, so you got a couple there, right? So they published this story that, by the way, at the mere whiff of lawyer contact, they completely rescinded and took down. Let's just begin with that. But in this original version, they named Ticketmaster, they named Santander Bank, and they basically said that Snowflake had an insider credential breached, and that had led to customers getting popped. Sensational story. Completely false, but very sensational. Good for them. They found a good way to get clicks, right? But that broke about 9 a.m. the day that we were going to go shopping. And as you can imagine, I was ex-Snowflake at that point, but that actually made me more attractive. I had press calling me. I had customers calling me, like Snowflake customers who knew me from my time there. I had Snowflakes calling me, like, do you know what's going on? I'm like, I don't. You work there. What are you talking? Like, And so it was a bad day, right? Anybody have a bad day on the phone because of a security incident? Anyone? I was going to say a lot of hands. Yeah. So that was my day because of the Snowflake breach. But let's talk about what actually happened, right? Now, I don't know if, are they going to get these slides? Is that a thing? I don't know. I put hyperlinks in here to the Snowflake statement and Mandiant's, I believe, excellent RCA for this attack. But if you don't have time to read that, or if you don't have the inclination, it's basically all right here, right? And spoiler alert, you've been spoiled, right? Because it's exactly what Lewis discussed, right? Essentially, what ended up happening was one group of bad guys using malware collected a bunch of credentials. They sold it to another group of bad guys, and those bad guys went around popping Snowflake accounts as a result, right? Now, I will confess that we know, because this has been confirmed, right? There was, in the InfoStealer malware cache of credentials, a Snowflake credential. It's true. For a demo account that had literally nothing in it, for an employee who had been fired. But, details, right? Details. So the other thing is that credential was useless to this attacker, right? But before we get off the slide, right, essentially what ends up happening is these guys who bought the credentials go and pop a bunch of Snowflake customers. And of course, the way it gets reported is that Snowflake had an issue, right? Now, you want to find me outside and have a discussion about like the role a vendor should take in communicating proper security procedures to their customers? We can have that conversation, but maybe remember what my job was. We do a lot of that at Snowflake, right? So anywho, it still happened. And what should we learn from this, right? Obviously, nothing is shocking. The only thing that's shocking is it's 2024 and we're still having this conversation, right? Literally, a document I recommend to any Snowflake customer or in fact, anyone on a SaaS platform that's not even Snowflake, because it could be useful there too, there's something called a security features checklist. You may or may not be listening to the author of the first version. And in that, the very first thing it says is please use network policies and please use MFA or even better, federated credentials, right? With MFA, of course, right? And that's literally the first things it tells you to do. And if every customer, if Woody had gone straight to the police, none of this would have happened. Are we all old enough to get that joke? But anyway, we get this, right? Fundamentals would have saved them. I also, again, on my soapbox will say that, you have to give the security team, and I don't think we're going to get much pushback in this room, but I talk to a lot of data people about security. I don't talk to a lot of security people about security. And what I tell them all the time, perhaps on your behalf, is that they have to give veto power to the security team. I don't want you to be the Department of No, but you might be the Department of Sanity, right? Because sometimes things shouldn't happen, like putting these credentials out there without MFA. And of course, the bad guys have a big profit motive, which gives them a huge advantage, right? You're all sitting here in this really hot room, not being rewarded to listen to us tell you things you might already know. And somewhere a bad guy is literally, like, with headphones on, being paid for the time to pop you, right? That's obviously asymmetrical, right? Yeah, so the reason Beyond Identity wants me to talk to you is that a little while ago, 4.5 years, right? I walked into Snowflake and I realized the huge burden that Snowflake had because of the data we were going to collect. And we didn't even have the thousands of customers it had then, right? But I knew we would, right? So I realized we had a huge burden and that we had to do more than most organizations to protect our people, our admins, the people who had the ability to affect that infrastructure, right? And what I wished for was someone to potentially have done certificates right, right? That was in my head. That's literally what I said to myself. And at another conference that will remain nameless, I was invited to come view in stealth a little company that turned out to be Beyond Identity. And they had done that and more right. And I brought them in, and it was love at first sight. And Snowflake was one of the first big deployments and remains a really happy, large customer of Beyond Identity, right? And even though I don't work there anymore, I'm bringing them into a tiny little startup that I'm working at right now because I believe in the tech, right? So that's why I'm here. All right. So there we go. There we are. Get back to your brisket.
There, let's talk more about brisket.
Because that's what everybody wants to hear, brisket.
So look, as you heard, right, like the lead is simple, like, customers got popped because they didn't have MFA on. Simple as that. But even if they had MFA on, they still might have been popped because they can have bad MFA, right? They can have phishable MFA, and that's no fun. So Beyond Identity fundamentally does it differently, right? I'm not going to go through all of the stuff up here, but I just want to point out one thing, which is we have a secure by design, security first mindset that leverages the hardware, right? We've invested a lot in making sure that we use the hardware that's now present in everybody's electronics, right? If you buy a piece of consumer electronics that is a PC or a phone or a Mac, whatever, it's going to have a TPM or a secure enclave in it. We use that, we leverage it to its fullest extent, and we build on top of it. It forms the basis of what we do. So when we look at how we do what we do, we have certain principles. The most important one is signatures over secrets, right? Shared secrets suck. There are no shared secrets in our solution. We do that by leveraging the hardware and making sure that the secrets stay local and they stay in that hardware so that the only way to get to them is if you have a lab and about $70,000 worth of laser equipment and you can go in and muck with the chip and make it do things it's not supposed to do. So if you can trust that that device came out of the fab unmolested, if you're, in other words, if you're anybody but the CIA or the NSA, et cetera, right? If you can trust that, that's where our chain of trust is rooted, is in that hardware. But let's not forget the humans, right? Because if you have all this great tech, but it's still hard to use, and humans can make mistakes, or you require humans to make decisions, like, we're fundamentally flawed, right? We're going to make bad decisions, right? And that's why, for example, MFA fatigue, where people just start spamming push notifications to you. Eventually, you click yes, they get in, kind of deal, right? So we want to use protocols that are automated rather than relying on humans to make decisions. Add on top of that continuous monitoring, continuous posture, the ability to verify everything that we say back to the hardware. In other words, we call it showing our work, right? Everything can be proved back to where the decision was made. And then making sure that we meet our users where they are. In other words, we run where our users are working.
And if I can, that was a huge thing to Snowflake in particular. Snowflake, Silicon Valley, darling, SaaS company, competing in probably the most competitive employment market in the world for the people who were the people at the time, the ones everyone wanted, right? The people who could build these data platforms. You can't tell them what kind of laptop to use. That's just not possible. You can't have that conversation. They're not having it, right? So the solution absolutely had to meet them where they were. And that disqualified just about every solution we looked at, right? Because we tried to find things to bake off against you at that point. And we failed. But,
absolutely. So you'll start to notice that, we talk about storing secrets in the TPM. It's fundamentally public-private key asymmetric cryptography. That's what's happening here, right? If anybody ever, I asked this question last night with a bunch of sales guys, and they all laughed at me, didn't know what I was talking about. But maybe in here, you guys, in college, who had their PGP or GPG key and went to signing parties and had people sign the keys so you could build your web of trust, right? Jonathan did. He's a nerd.
I was waiting. I knew that was a nerd trap, but I walked right into it.
So the point is, though, with the hardware and with what we do, that web of trust is being built automatically inside your enterprise. So we're binding a user's identity to one or more devices, and we're storing those secrets in a way so that they cannot be stolen. At a very high level, this is what we look like, right? And the one thing that I want to point out here is the device signals that are coming from that device. So we have a notion of a device key and of a user key. Those two things are bound together. But we can pull that device posture off and continuously evaluate it as part of the access decision when users are asking to access resources. Right? So continuous authentication with hardware-bound credentials using device posture means that when your users are going and, say, traveling to Europe or moving around, or they're in an untrustworthy locations, you can control what they can and can't get access to. Or you can simply say, hey, I'm going to require an extra step up. Right? So the policy to control that is available to you. Again, this is what Snowflake was using to protect their enterprise when the noise about this breach happened. So simple, right? Aaron Franklin on the left, crap on the right. You don't want crap. I'm not calling our competitors crap. I'm calling that brisket crap. You can draw the conclusion that you want there, but there's a fundamentally different way to do this that is more secure. And that's what Beyond Identity does. So when the breach, quote unquote, happened, Snowflake did all the stuff that they were supposed to do, but they also said, hey, guys, can you, just check our optics here. Make sure, go look at your data. We're looking at all the reports. Let's just make sure, right? They spent a lot of time making sure, right? Because, you never know. So because we have this verifiable chain of trust over every authentication that happens with a Snowflake employee that's tied to a device, tied to a user, cryptographically signed over, we know a lot of stuff, right? So when we got the phone call, right, from the Snowflake folks, and we jumped on a call and said, hey.
Were you shopping for a purse when you got the phone call?
I was not shopping for a purse when I got the phone call.
Not even. Okay. Were you making brisket?
I wish I was making brisket. So we started to look at some things for them. And I'm going to show you some of the things that we looked at. We can talk about it in just for a second. You can think about as a user in our system, they're their own little certificate authority, if you will, issuing certificates as they need them when they're enrolling their identities onto devices. This particular life cycle is for one of those quote-unquote former Snowflake employees who had a demo account, right? There was a lot of noise about this, and so this was looking at their corporate account, not their demo account. When we do this user and entity behavioral analysis, we're looking out on the left, we've got certificates, the green. The certificates are essentially the passkeys, right? There's 5 unique devices in play here. Over time, those devices are participating in authentications. There's one failed authentication there at the top. You can tell that device at the top is the primary corporate device because it's the one that's used a lot. We allow users to extend their credentials, right, so that they can work on BYOD devices. You can see, for example, where maybe a credential got extended there, right there. Right, they're maybe doing some work on a home machine, whatnot, and then we flagged what we call risky authentication attempts. Right, so we did this. This is an example of this particular one, and then we have a scoring, we have metrics, we have all this stuff, and we pop out like, what do we think about it? Right, it's all automated, like we're not literally kind of going through and doing this. When those things pop out, we take all those authentications, and then we can look at certain risk scores and risk measures. For example, this one's a geolocation, and the X there in the middle that I've circled right there is the one particular passkey or certificate that's being analyzed in relation, for example, to the other authentication attempts that happen for all of the other, in this particular case, users' passkeys, right? And the bubbles represent the cone of uncertainty, if you will, for all their other authentication attempts, right? And as you do this, we do it with IP addresses. Again, where are they authenticating from? We know their IP address because we're gathering that device posture. Is it standing out as abnormal or not? Time. How do they authenticate over time compared to the distribution, right, over all of their authentication attempts, for example? This kind of stuff is happening with every authentication. You can hook into it with policy, for example, hook into the scoring, or you can look at it after the fact to analyze what may have happened. Remember, what we're trying to do here is ultimately trying to help Snowflake prove a negative, right? That they weren't breached, which you can't really do. You can just give a mountain of evidence so they can add it to the other mountain of evidence that they're building, right? Because they're engaged with Mandiant and CrowdStrike and all this stuff to give them another perspective. So we did that. That's an example. We did it. Then we did it. It happens for every single one of their users, every single one of their devices. Score, rank, flag for risk. Out popped a report that was delivered over so that they could see and factor it into their analysis. And their conclusion, as you may imagine, was, hey, we did not get breached, right? We, as a company, didn't get breached. And that added evidence so that they could confidently say that it was their users who hadn't followed their best practices around turning on MFA, network access restrictions, things like that, that actually suffered the breach. So you may have noticed, like, what we have here, I apologize. Who's seen Sneakers? Please raise your hands. Like, you've seen Sneakers, right? Like, oh my God, there's not nearly enough hands raised. Sneakers is the best hacker movie ever, right? If you haven't seen it, it's an amazing movie. Robert Redford's in it. Sidney Poitier's in it. Dan Aykroyd's in it. Like, it's an amazing movie. Ben Kingsley's in it. Like, the guy's run a ton of Oscars. This particular fellow is a guy named Whistler. I this is going to kind of ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, I apologize, but C-Tech Astronomy was an anagram for too many secrets, right? And they were trying to figure this out. There was also, I'm not going to use this joke because nobody's seen it, but there was another anagram along the way there that was really funny. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Cooties, ... You know what I'm talking about. So what you may have noticed is that what Beyond Identity is effectively doing here is deploying into the organization a user-friendly, secure public key infrastructure. The thing that we've been trying to achieve for years and years and years, decades and decades, right? How long's PGP, GPG been around? It just never had SMIME and all this crap. What you actually get out of this is verifiable secure identity, right? We use it to control access, right? We use it so that you know that your users can't be phished when they're authenticating to an application.
And here, I'm just gonna
Go ahead.
How many people here have been to the Beyond Identity booth already? Yes, no, no? Okay. If you haven't, you should go for two reasons. Number one, they've got a screen about as big as the screen in front of us doing demos that you can click through yourself so you can ignore the salesperson and just show yourself the product, which is a super cool feature of any booth. The other thing is they've got the creepiest demo in the world running that actually will show you how this
right.
reality check works, and it's super creepy. If you like creepy, this booth is for you. Right? If you don't like creepy, just approach it from the left, and you can avoid the camera that will make it creepy. You should still see the demo thing.
It's a really cool demo, and
yes.
It's an example of where we need to get to as an industry, right? As we evolve from the very basic MFA use cases to phishing-resistant MFA to now putting security back into identity. And it's an example of what's enabled when you have a platform that's built on these principles. There is no way anybody is ever going to build a deep fake detector that works consistently forever. It's a race to the bottom. If you have a perfect detector, then I'm just going to build a deep fake AI and train it with that detector, right? But what if you had device and user credentials deployed throughout your enterprise that you knew were stored safely, that you didn't rely on users to remember anything or do anything, that was in the TPM on these devices? You're not NSA, you're not CAI, you don't have to worry about the device being hacked and then pulling the credentials out of the TPM, right? We're everybody else. We can trust the TPM. Now what you can say is, look, I don't know if I'm on a Zoom call, so one of the things we're announcing here is this reality check for Zoom product. And it basically, you get on a Zoom call and you get this cool badge up here that says whether you're who you say you are or not. It gives you some information. The fundamental difference is what we're asserting, what we're attesting to, are the things that we can prove. Right? We're attesting to the provable facts of this particular business interaction, this Zoom call. I'm attesting to that it's coming from a device that has an enrolled credential, right? And I'm attesting that it's coming from a that a user has used their biometric to log into that device. I don't know if the image is being generated at all, but I can attest that the device is correct and that an authentication event happened on that device and a biometric was used at that moment in time inside the application.
I mean, if all of that's true and they still can run a deepfake from there, you've got bigger problems.
You've got bigger problems. So we're attesting to the provable facts that are enabled by having this public key infrastructure now deployed throughout the enterprise. And it now enables us to say, how can we take this secure identity and start to enable business applications to attest to the things that they're doing, Zoom being one. The next one's obvious, right? It's email. Like, how long have we been trying to do not even encrypted, just signed email, so that you know when the email comes from the CEO or the CFO that it's actually really them, right? Who heard about the Ferrari thing that happened a week or two ago? You heard about it, right? I'll end with the Ferrari thing because it's a good example of how you can get lucky, but it's also a good example of the basic thing that has to happen, right? Ferrari was in the middle of some acquisition. Someone over there, I can't remember who it was, CFO or someone high up in the org, VP of finance or something like that, got a text from CEO, said, hey, I need you to do this. This is really important. Basically, ... send some money. VP of finance guy, whoever it was smart enough and said, hey, give me a call. I want to talk to you. Sure. They called him up, used deepfake to mimic the CEO's voice. Now, this is where like 98, 99% of the, I love VPs of finance, but like they would fail this next challenge, right? This particular one said, you know what? I hear the voice, but I'm not going to do anything you say until you tell me the name of or the title of the book that you recommended to me in person last week. And attacker hangs up the phone. Right? It's super clever, right? Prove you know something. Prove you can do something. Prove or attest to a fact. Right? Now, that particular interaction is not going to scale, right? Because like people aren't generally that smart. They're not even smart enough to not click on links these days.
Not enough people are reading books either.
Not enough people are reading books. But it's a good example of what you can enable if you have this capability in your business. And you no longer have to worry about secrets being stolen. You no longer have to worry about user frustration with using the technology. And you can believe in and rely on the fundamental chain of trust that goes back to that hardware to enable this stuff. So with that, I'll end with, I hope I got the booth number right. You can come by and check us out at the booth, 2068. We've got the reality check demo going. We've got some really smart people there to answer your questions. Okay, thank you.
Anybody got any questions? I know you're not really supposed to do that at the end of these
Yeah.
sessions, but we have time. Anybody? There's a question. Go for it, dude. We do not have a runner mic. You're going to have to like speak the loudest you've ever spoken in your life.
Do you allow external keys like hardware-bound passkeys as an example of TPM having information?
Repeat the question.
So the question was, do you allow external hardware-bound, tokens or whatever to participate in the platform? And we do. So you can provide, essentially we call it layered authentication. You can rely on hardware-bound tokens in addition to, to augment the authentication process. Absolutely. Any other questions? The question was, you could use something like the YubiKey? You can, in addition to, right, as part of like an additional factor. Right now it does, but that limitation will go away, but you'll lose certain capabilities because like a YubiKey doesn't have the ability to provide device posture information as part of the authentication, for example. But just to give you an example, so if you're into YubiKeys like in FIDO and all that stuff, like Dean Sachs, who's very heavily involved in those standards, actually just joined the company from Amazon. So it's very much on our radar using that stuff.
I'll plug ID Pro if you're into identity management and YubiKey and all that jazz. If you're not a member of ID Pro, you should be. Founding member on stage. There you go.
Another question? Shared machines, yeah.
Good question.
So we have customers who do shared machines and they use what we call roaming authentication right now. Roaming authentication is an authentication flow that leverages your cell phone or a token. Absolutely. So Chromebooks, for example, is a common use case. There are early use cases for us, but we are supporting them now for customers. Any other questions? You guys just want to hang out now, or?
Anybody have any questions about briskets?
Briskets?
Or purses?
All right.
I learned a lot about purses. No? Okay, good enough.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.